Good evening.
Good evening, Emma. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you on your new phone?
I know, new phone, new lights, new haircut, new shave, everything. Shirt's
Looking
quite
good, Andy.
unusual. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So let's think a little bit what you've done so far on Life and Soul, shall we, before we get on tonight's subject. We started off by thinking a bit about meaning. Do you remember we talked about meaning, about what was really important? And we
I
talked
do
about
remember.
work and family and relationships and obviously chocolate.
Yeah, that's you.
Yeah. Then we talked a bit about the existence of God, and we had a fun interview with your dad, which we all thoroughly enjoyed, giving us a very different sort of view, which was great. And talked about those who do and don't believe in God and so on as well. Then we spent quite a lot of time talking about Jesus, about some of his teachings, some of his actions, some of his claims, things like he taught us to love our neighbours and forgive those who hurt you and turn the other cheek, which is quite difficult kind of teaching. He also did some amazing things. Do you remember about it? We talked about him turning water into wine.
Yes. Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, and 180 gallons of wine. We weren't talking a couple of bottles, were we? It was good. And how he controlled the weather on occasion and healed people and did amazing stuff. But somebody worth thinking about. Yeah. And one more thing he said was his claims were things like he said that him and God were one. He was very much God. And also he was able to actually forgive the wrong things that people actually did. Yeah. So I'm just dominating, just going through this stuff quickly here.
No, that's fine. Just reminding us.
I'll keep going. Everything's new. And lastly, we talked about HTMU. Now, what did HTMU stand for, Emma? Do you remember?
The human tendency to muck up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just like saying that. Human tendency to muck up. And we talked a little bit about the cross, didn't we, as well? And about how Jesus actually willingly died on the cross, which was actually quite a big deal. Because he said, I can't just leave with HTMU because it's too serious and has too much power over you. So I'm going to prepare to die to get that kind of sorted out, to pay the punishment that's got to be actually paid. Many of us think about the cross as being quite a dark thing, I think, that God's out to kind of judge us and things. But I think, Jesus turned it around to be quite a positive thing, that was a good thing.
Yeah, there was something that we talked about, and then I forgot to say on the night, wasn't it, about how God loves us just as we are, but he loves us too much to leave us as we are. It's kind of what the cross is about. God wanting us to have life in all its fullness, free of all of the rubbish that holds us down, holds us back.
Yeah. And then do you remember last week we actually got to the point of actually saying, so Jesus died on the cross. And then the Christians believe the Bible says he came back to life again, what's called the resurrection. And
yes,
the resurrection
indeed.
is not true. Go on.
I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
The resurrection's not true, but that's not what you were saying, was it?
No, if we just cut it there, that's really ruins the course for us, doesn't it, really? If we say the resurrection is not true.
If the resurrection isn't true, yeah.
Thank you very much. then actually, there is no Christianity. What Jesus said was all a lie. So there we go. So that's in 2.5 minutes, a very garbled summary of what we've got to so far.
No,
so, Emma, tell us about the survey this week. Tell us about the survey. What have we done survey-wise this week?
Yes, so we did a survey just briefly this evening. Some of you will have taken part. Thanks for that. And we asked, do you believe in life after death? Yes or no? And most of you said yes.
Oh, wow.
So about 85%, average was about 85% of people said yes. So on Facebook, 16 people said yes, 3 people said no. And on Instagram, 4 people said yes, 1 person said no. So a lot of people believe in life after death. And we're going to be thinking about that this evening. I guess it's not just religion, Andy. This is quite a widespread belief in life after death, isn't there?
Yeah. And what that life is going to be like, of course, may be another question for maybe later. We will see what that's like, basically. But
yeah, I'm thinking about
Go on.
I'm thinking about the film Ghost, 80s classic.
Oh, right. Yeah, the old pottery scene is my favourite, of course.
Right, okay. Well, I'm thinking that there's a bit right at the end of Ghost where the kind of baddies in the film die, and you see them kind of being dragged away by some kind of spirit, and then
that's so scary. I've forgotten that.
It's really scary. And then there's the I've forgotten his name. Sam, is it, the main male character who's kind of he's died, but he's been hanging around to try and protect his girlfriend, and then you see him kind of taken up to heaven. That's kind of the implication. And I mean, Ghost is not a religious film at all. It's kind of, I guess conveys something of this sense that a lot of us have, that death can't just be the end. There must be something after it.
Yeah, but we'll come back to that. I'm going to drag us back to our subject for the evening to start off.
Drag us back, Andy.
So can I just invite people who are watching to make some comments, ask some questions about what you think about life after death, and we'll read some of those out later on if that's helpful. Do you know what, Emma? I reckon you can't ever be 100% certain about anything.
Death and taxes, everything else is for grabs. That's what my dad always said.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fair enough. So I want to just think again very briefly about some of the evidence which people put forward about Jesus. Now, this is both Roman, Jewish, and Christian evidence. This is not just stuff which is actually in the Bible. First of all, that Jesus did actually exist as a genuine historical person, and he did actually preach for 3 years, and that's actually on many records, again, not just Christian. That the Jewish leaders actually recognized Jesus was a miracle worker, but they hated his criticism of them. So Jesus actually took on the church of the day, if you will. Another thing which was certain is that one of his followers, a guy called Judas, actually betrayed Jesus with a kiss. I don't know if you know much about crucifixion, Emma. I did some research on it some years ago, and it's a really evil way to kill someone. First of all, they actually flogged people, and people actually sometimes actually died from the flogging. We're not talking a little bit of string here. We're talking about some rope with some metal and some stone and things in it, and used to rip people's backs off and sometimes attack the internal organs and kill people off. So some people even died before they actually got crucified. And of course, the Roman guards were experts at killing. They knew what they were doing. They had done this many hundreds of times, bless them.
Didn't they get in trouble if the person didn't die? Is that right? Like if they let the person off or if they didn't do their job properly?
Not just trouble, Emma. They actually would have been crucified themselves if they hadn't made sure someone was actually dead.
Right.
And that's why they stuck the spear in Jesus' side, just to make sure he was actually dead.
Yes, you see that in religious paintings, don't you? Sometimes you'll see kind of the marks on Jesus' hands and also in his side. So they just wanted to make sure that he was dead, right?
Absolutely. Then we understand that a body was put into a garden tomb with a Roman guard. I don't know how many guards they had, but it was probably 6 or 8 or something, I should imagine. I don't know if you know that one.
I didn't know that.
But it was quite burly chaps. We're not just talking about a guy on a rocking chair smoking a cigarette, I don't think.
Right. Okay.
Then 3 days later, the information tells us that the tomb was empty for some reason, and we'll come on to that in a minute, basically. But the thing was amazing, the disciples who actually ran away when Jesus was first of all arrested, actually started to say, do you know what? Jesus has come back to life again. And the faith in Jesus spread like wildfire all over the place. And people became Christians and follow Jesus, even though allegedly he was dead and that should have been the end of it. So that stuff is probably not really in dispute. But tell us what actually might be in dispute about what happened to Jesus.
Yeah, so thanks, Andy. You've given us the basic facts, or at least the things that are widely accepted as facts. Certainly the fact that Jesus existed, the fact that he died, the Romans would have made sure he was dead, he was put in a tomb, and then 3 days later, people started saying he's not dead anymore, the tomb's empty, he's alive. And Christians call that the resurrection. So some people have said, well, that can't be true. And there have been a number of kind of possibilities that have been explored. So some people say, well, maybe Jesus didn't really die. Maybe he kind of fainted. He wasn't really dead. So when we say he rose again, he wasn't dead in the first place. Well, we've already said, haven't we, that the Romans would have gotten in trouble if the Roman soldiers hadn't made sure he was dead. And the fact that they were pretty good at killing people. Yeah. So that's not quite hard to believe, really.
Yeah. And can I just say again that they would have themselves been killed if they found that someone had actually been just allowed to live. Yeah. And it wasn't just one or two guards here. It was a number of guards who had noticed that. So it was...
Yeah, so not many people would claim that. But some people would say, okay, the disciples stole Jesus' body. They wanted to believe that he was alive. They stole his body and hid it. And they said, oh, look, the tomb's empty. He's risen again. Well, of course, that could have happened. But then the question is, well, why were the disciples then prepared to die for their faith if they knew that it was based on a lie? The followers of Jesus, most of them were martyred in the time of the early church. They went out saying, Jesus is alive, turn to Jesus. And Christianity was not popular in the Roman Empire, and most of them lost their lives. It's kind of hard to understand why they would do that if they knew that they'd made it all up.
I just have to put myself in their shoes for a second to think, I made something up, yeah, for whatever reason, so I look big, for money or something like that. And then actually somebody says, well, is this true? Is this not true? And if I said, well, of course it's true. Okay, we're going to kill you in that case if you say it's true. But if you knew it's not true, I'm going to say, actually, you've got me. That's how it was.
Yeah.
Maybe one is brave enough, but all of them, I don't get it.
Yeah. So another possibility is some people have said, okay, well, the Romans or the Jewish authorities stole the body and hid it. Well, if that's the case, then when people started saying, oh, look, it's a miracle, he's alive, he's risen, why didn't they produce the body to say, hey, look, they're making it up and shut everyone up? So that kind of doesn't really make a whole lot of sense either. And perhaps more commonly, I would imagine more people might say, okay, well, it says in the Bible that he rose, but the people who wrote that, they were lying, or they were, excitable or whatever. But if we look at the accounts of the resurrection, if we look at the in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're the 4 books that tell the story of Jesus' life and death and resurrection. And in all 4 books, we find it's the women followers of Jesus who go to his body on the 3rd day and they find the tomb empty. It's interesting. We talk about the disciples, the 12 disciples, and we sometimes say, oh, disciples all ran away when Jesus died. But actually, they didn't all run away. The women didn't run away. And the women went to Jesus' body on the 3rd day and they found the tomb empty. And then they went to tell the disciples and they didn't believe them, so they went to check. Now, the thing is that at that time, a woman's kind of testimony, a woman's word was not really believed and not really worth a lot. So you kind of think, why, if they were making it up, why would they not have men witness the resurrection? Does that make sense, Andy?
It does. I'm just still freaked out about women being treated so badly all through history.
Yeah. I mean, at that time in a court of law, if you wanted to argue against one man's testimony, you needed 2 women. Like 2 women were worth the same weight as one man, if that makes sense, as a witness. So it kind of you sort of think, well, if they were going to make it up, why would they have used women? So there's
actually that makes a load of sense, because obviously if women weren't worth as much as a man, then you're going to use a man. You're not going to use a woman. You're just not.
If you're making it up, you wouldn't have thought so. No. So it's quite, so for those, understandably, a lot of people find it quite hard to believe the idea that Jesus might have risen from the dead. It's a unique event. It's pretty hard to get your head around. But actually, there's some pretty good reasons to. It's not just wishful thinking. There's some pretty good reasons to go along with the Bible's account. I mean, perhaps the main one really is the fact that the church began and spread, that these terrified followers, the men who were kind of hiding away, they ran away after after Jesus was arrested. They were hiding in a locked room. We read in John's Gospel, because they were afraid they would be arrested too. And then after the resurrection, or after they said that Jesus had risen, they went out, as we said before, proclaiming the words, and a lot of them died for their faith. And yet through that, the church was born, and this is 2,000 years ago. So it's kind of quite hard to explain that if the resurrection was a massive hoax.
Yeah. Also, I understand there were quite a lot of people at the time who claimed to be the Messiah as well, and they just kind of died out. They were often put to death, and that was the end of it. Whereas obviously Jesus was put to death, but then the church actually has grown and grown and grown. And So
just a few things to think about, just some things that perhaps you might not have heard before. I just encourage people to read the accounts in the Bible, perhaps read the Gospel of Mark, that's the shortest one. So if you like in books, Gospel of Mark, very short. You could read it you could read it in one sitting at a pinch, but a couple of days and you'd read through it. Yeah. I've actually got another book that I've brought along tonight, in addition to the Bible. One of my favourite books.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Have you read it, Andy?
Have I read it? We've read it. We've had the CDs. Our kids grew up with Harry Potter. So we went along with it. We loved it. In fact, we've had holidays when there's a new book available, and my wife used to sit down with us and read it. It was a bright sunshine outside, but we'd sit all day and have the book read to us, just loving it.
Yeah.
So no, I've never heard of
it. I started reading Harry. I was virtually an adult by the time the books were published. That'll tell you how old I am. And when the later books were coming out, I was a teacher, and I remember going to queue up at midnight the night that the new Harry Potter book was going to be released, to get it as soon as I could. And then I had to read it really quickly, because I knew that once I got to school on Monday, some horrible kid was going to tell me something that happened in the book. Yeah. So like this one, this is the last Harry Potter book. This is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I read this in 11 hours, in one sitting. Yeah, it's a great book.
Go on.
Right, why am I talking about Why am I talking about Harry Potter? Well, there's a lot in Harry Potter about life and death and life after death, and particularly in the Deathly Hallows. So there's a really touching bit where Harry goes to his parents' graves. So Harry Potter is a character who's for those 5 people or so in the UK that don't know about Harry Potter, his parents were killed when he was a baby, so he's never known his parents. And there's really, really touching bit where he goes to see their graves, and he's kind of thinking to himself, are they really there somewhere in spirit, or are they just bodies in a grave? It's really, really heart-wrenching. But J.K. Rowling, she seems to have this idea of life after death. And so she talks about Horcruxes. There's all this thing about people this evil wizard Voldemort trying to defeat death, and so he comes up with this way of trying to live forever. And there's this bit where Hermione is saying, she's talking about a Horcrux, which is this kind of spell that you can use, and she says a Horcrux is the complete opposite of a human being. Whatever happens to your body, your soul will survive untouched. And so she says, if I picked up a sword right now, Ron, and I ran you through with it, I wouldn't damage your soul at all. And Ron says, that'll be a real comfort to me, I'm sure. So I guess that a lot of people would agree with that, wouldn't they? This idea that our bodies die, but there's something that carries on. Is that something that do you think a lot of people would have that view, Andy?
I think so. We talked earlier on about a lot of people being what's called a vague agnostic. We'll probably think, there probably is something after death. So we'll just see what happens, really. And people often talk that way, that if somebody, unfortunately, their family has already died, that they'll see them again in the future. So I think most people have that view. And the survey, 85% thought the people, there's going to be something after death. What that is, of course, is maybe one of the questions. We've got a couple of questions here about the resurrection. Can I just read these out to you, see what you think?
Go for it.
it's not unusual for people to see loved ones who have died. In a study of nearly 20,000 people, 13% reported seeing the dead. Is this not what happened with the women? They wanted to see Jesus, therefore they imagined he was back, basically.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so it could have hallucination.
Yeah.
Well, so I suppose it could have. But then if you read the accounts in certainly Matthew, Luke, and John, Mark's account of the resurrection kind of stops quite suddenly. You kind of feel like he ran out of steam and I don't know, got bored or his arm was aching, he stopped writing. But in the other Gospels, we hear a bit more, and actually lots of people see the risen Jesus, or that's what the Bible tells us, that lots of different people, and I think at one point 500 people at one time, the Bible says, saw Jesus. So it's kind of, you can think maybe one person, maybe a couple of people might have a hallucination, but it's harder to explain how lots of people might have a hallucination.
Yeah. I've heard the fact over 500 people on 11 different occasions saw Jesus after he was supposed to have died. Yeah. So as you say, mass hallucinations, that doesn't happen. It's just one person at a time normally, because they're tired or on some kind of drugs or ill or something. So yeah. Another question here is, do any other sources apart from the Bible speak of Jesus coming back to life?
Okay. Well, I guess I guess they probably would. Well, they would talk about people saying he came back to life, but I mean the Bible is a book. Is like is a religious book, if you see what I mean. Whereas other, you can say, oh, the tomb was empty, but in order to explain why it was empty, you kind of need faith. Does that make sense? All you can say is the historical fact is his body was put in the tomb, and then 3 days later it wasn't there. There was an interesting question from your friend Rashma just came up.
Just before we go on to Rashma, though, we'll find out about that other thing. Because I've got a vague feeling I have read some stuff, both Roman and Jewish, that actually say, as you said, that Jesus did come back to life. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. So I will go and do some research. I will get a book out and have a look at it, and I will answer that next week if I can, or say no, or we don't know. Okay. Well, Reshma's question, fantastic. Here we go.
As a Hindu, we believe in life after death. Most Hindus believe that humans are in a cycle of death and rebirth. When a person dies, their soul is reborn in a different body. We believe that we go into the cycle of life and death 7 times. I didn't know about the 7 times. I'd heard about that reincarnation, but that's really interesting. So Hindus too would have the idea that there's something after death, that we're reborn. Obviously, kind of a different way of looking at things. Do you know what really blew my mind though? When I was very lucky. I got to study theology at college, and you know what we were saying about J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter, and she talks about the human body and how you can kill the body, but the soul you can't really damage. The soul is like there forever. I think a lot of people see life after death in that way, and it sounds as if maybe that's similar to how the Hindus might see it. It'd be interesting to see what Reshma has to say, that the body dies but the soul remains and keeps being reborn. Actually, the Christian idea of resurrection is a bit different than that. What the Bible actually teaches is that Jesus completely died, that his body died, his soul died, he was completely dead, and then God brought him back to life again. I don't know, it might sound like a subtle distinction, but it was kind of something that really was astonishing to me, because if you think, oh, well, the soul survives even though the body dies, that's like, well, then all God has to do is figure out what to do with you. He sends you to heaven or he sends you to hell. We were talking about that last week. Actually, if resurrection is about, well, we're dead body and soul, and then God chooses to raise us, I mean, that's incredible to think about. And that means a lot to me, because that kind of says, instead of me worrying about, oh, have I been a good person, will I go to heaven, or have I been a bad person, I might go to hell, or do I believe enough, do I believe enough to go to heaven or not? It kind of takes that anxiety away, because it's saying, actually, life after death rests in the fact that God loves me, and wants to raise me back to life again. Kind of blew my mind.
It's a really good thought. We've obviously talked quite a lot about religion and trying to do right things and so on as well. And if what we're saying is then it doesn't actually rely on that, it actually relies on God rather than us. That is, well, it's very cool, isn't it, really? Let's be honest.
Yeah. So Gina has written something interesting here. There are quite a few cases of what Catholic people call apparitions, of lots of people seeing Mother Mary too over various years in different places, often appearing to children or poor people. Interesting. So as well as seeing Jesus, some people, Christian people, Catholic Christians have seen Mary. So Mary, the mother of Jesus, I guess that would be.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be incredible, wouldn't it? If you saw someone appear to you like that. I mean, nothing like that's ever happened to me.
No.
I think of myself as quite an unspiritual person in a lot of ways. There's not been many times in my life that I've really felt I've heard God speak to me, or I've had a really spiritual experience. Most of the time, I'm drinking my coffee to wake myself up and trying not to eat too much chocolate,
Yeah. There's a book going around, The Case for Christ apparently is worth a read. There's also a film called The Case for Christ as well, which I guess is on Netflix, it says here, and Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime. That's very good, isn't it? Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, Emma, question.
Yes.
Maybe for you, maybe for other people. What difference would it make to your life, or has it made to your life, because you believe there is life after death? And I guess I'll throw that question out for everybody who's watching and listening.
Yeah.
What difference would it make if there was actually life after death? And I guess that might have changed your life. It certainly has changed my life. I'll let you go first, because we might run out of time then.
I think it's really important for me just to have a sense of hope, because life is short. I mean, at times it feels long. I guess when it's raining and it's lockdown and there's nothing to do, it might feel a bit long. But actually, life is pretty short. And I'm 40 now, and I don't know where those years have gone. I really don't. And there's so much that I want to do with my life, and I've had half of it already. But more than that, when I hear of terrible situations in the world, we've talked about racism and just the awful things that happen because of racism. We talked about genocide a while back, how people have killed in the name of religion, but also in the name of all sorts of other things. There's some terrible stuff that goes on in this world, and I kind of, to know that Christ has been raised, tells me that God can raise anything, that God can raise me. God can transform any awful situation and bring new life out of it. And that for, I guess for people who've had a really awful human life, physical life, that there might be hope for them after death. And a number of reasons really why life after death is really significant for me. Yeah. How about you?
I think the word hope is very important at the moment, because no one really knows what is going to happen over the next few days, weeks, certainly months, going into September and October, and who knows where we're going to be, basically. Yeah. For me, hope is important, but also knowing that there's some purpose in my life. I'm not nearly 40. I'm probably 3/4 of my way through my life, based on what you just said, nearly. So that's very sobering, if nothing else. And maybe that gives me hope to think about other things in my life. But knowing there's some purpose to think, do you know what is going on is not meaningless. There is something out there which is bigger than me, and I want to be part of that, and maybe make a difference for good in what is actually going on. If the world does revolve around me, and I sometimes joke, and sometimes I'm quite serious about it, about the world does go around Andy. But the reality is that everything is much bigger. There's so many more people out there as well. I just want to do stuff to help those folks, which probably think there is more than this, as you said. So very good, very good. Have we got any more questions here? Nick's actually said, I've just watched American Gospel on Netflix. What a watch.
What's it about, Nick?
Seen that?
I haven't seen it.
No. No. Let's see what he comes back with.
Yeah.
So in fact, do you know what we're doing next week?
Yes, I do this time. Next week we're thinking about so what, basically. So bear in mind all of the things that we've talked about. What do we do about it? So we're thinking about spiritual practices. We're thinking about what it means to be a person of faith. We've talked a lot, I guess, about beliefs, haven't we, Andy? And meaning and how but we're kind of moving on to think about, well, so how might we live our lives because of all of the things that we've talked about?
Yeah. And I think the thing about what now, question mark, to say, okay, so what we've been talking about over the last, has it been 7 weeks?
I've lost track.
7 weeks, isn't it?
Right?
Yeah, 7 weeks. So because of what we've been talking about, what now? And I think that's really the kind of challenge. And as we said on the screen there, if folks want to send some questions through to the email, it unfortunately wasn't working last week, but it is working now. We checked it today. So please send some questions through so we can prepare. I will have a look out about documentation, not just Christian documentation, about did Jesus come back to life again for folks for next week. I think it was David who asked that question. So we'll do that. Yeah. Brilliant. I'm just reading the questions here. Yeah. Sarah Bundock is saying, shout out to all of those behind the scenes. That's David and Oliver and Ruth this end, who's helping make this run. And absolutely right. We totally agree with that. Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks, people.
Work. Yeah. And as Oliver's suggestion, I should get a new phone, which obviously I've got. And I think this has been better quality this week.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard every word you've said tonight.
That's not always a benefit, is it?
No comment.
Brilliant.
So, see you again this time next week.
Yeah, I think we'll go for that, shall we? See how we get after that. Yeah.
Great.
Brilliant. Thanks, folks, for tuning in. Have a good week. And we'll see you this time next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
If there's no resurrection, there's no living Christ. And face it, if there's no resurrection for Christ, everything we've told you is smoke and mirrors, and everything you've staked your life on is smoke and mirrors. Not only that, but we would be guilty of telling a string of barefaced lies about God. If Christ was not raised, then all you're doing is wandering about in the dark as lost as ever. If all we get out of Christ is a little inspiration for a few short years, we're a pretty sorry lot. This is taken from the Message Bible paraphrase, selected verses from 1 Corinthians 15.